So with us next, we have Ian Falconer, who is the lead at Fishy Filaments. Some of you are probably aware of his wares, so to speak. Ian is an engineer with almost 3 decades worth of experience in the global raw materials and supply chains infrastructure industry. In 2017, he launched the company Fishy Filaments, which has been now recycling waste fishing nets, which have been drifting up on the Cornish coast, and turning them back into something useful with value for the rest of us to enjoy and to 3D print with. I will leave Ian to describe more about his company's activities, but it's an absolute pleasure having Ian with us today. And if you have a presentation, feel free to share that with us if you have that.
Can you see that?
Excellent. Yeah, that's there. So in your own time, when you're ready, please, the floor is yours.
Hi. So my name's Ian Falconer, as it says. I come from a background of global natural resource systems, engineering, policy level analysis, global finance, and generally working with large-scale infrastructure and the financing thereof. Since 2015, when I set the Fishy Filaments project, I've been working with additive manufacturing using polymers, and specifically nylon 6 from used fishing nets. The company itself was launched in 2017 when I had a reasonable conception of what it would be like. So we're based down here in the far southwest of the UK in Cornwall. It's a fishing community, so waste fishing nets are an absolute problem down here. I work directly with the commercial fishing industry on the basis that prevention is better than cure. We don't collect nets from outside of the industry. That is a matter of consternation for some people, but it is an absolute necessity with regards to actually building a business on the basis of recycling used plastics. We do need traceability, we do need to have consistency of supply, and we do need to be able to demonstrate value at both ends of the recycling supply chain. Since launching 2017, we crowdfunded that first launch and got over 400 shareholders, generated £217,000 to kick off the company, and subsequently went on to do a second major round of crowdfunding, which brought in another 600 or so shareholders, and to date we've raised over £500,000 to conduct R&D and build out a recycling plant based down here in the far southwest of Cornwall. We've had virtually no success in gaining cash grants from UK governments, philanthropic arms, or EU innovation funds. In fact, we've had no innovation funding whatsoever from any agency. All of the innovation costs for this project and company have come from private investment. So our mission, should we wish to accept it, is to provide a nation scale impact on carbon emissions. What does that mean? Nation scale. Nation scale for us is 2 million tonnes of CO2 emissions per year. That would rank us as the 150-something largest nation in terms of carbon emissions in the world. So genuinely a nation scale, given there's over 210 nations in the world. And how we're going to deliver that? We'll deliver that through the development and deployment of plastics recycling processes and recycled materials. And this is all from one class of fishing net. What isn't in the mission, and this is directly kind of in response to the challenge for this presentation, we have no commitments to social responsibility. We don't define our mission in terms of ethical boundaries or a stated ethos. We don't say whether we're going to do it through non-profit or profit business models. We have 0 commitments to share any IP, and we haven't got anything in our mission about delivering for 3D printing. So we don't meet any of the required criteria for participation in this meeting. There's good reasons why we don't have any of that, and it's all to do with the scaling and the deployment of the solution. We're at a development stage, and so is realistic, so is anti-manufacturing. That means that a lot of the commitments that you make as you start out in a business will either change or evolve, or not be there, not be a challenge, not be relevant by the time you get to the point of scaling a real business model. The funding mechanisms that we have available restrict what we can say, what we can do, and how we can spend that money. So you may have a very generous philanthropic funder who allows you to spend their money in whatever way you wish, because they have no shareholders to be legally accountable to. You may have a generous ethics committee at your university who allows you to spend a smaller pot of money in a more specific way, or you may have a demanding set of shareholders who wish you to spend their money in ways that they can see and align with their own values. In that sense, there is also some definite legal constraints on why we don't talk about things like ethics or social responsibility. As a formally constituted legal entity, we have a set of rules that we have to follow, and those rules, we don't get to choose those. So if we're going to be a legal company or we're going to be a charity, there is a definite set of roles and responsibilities that we have. Lots and lots of check boxes to tick before we get to try and do what we want to do out in the real world. And then there's a final one in how we get to go out and deploy what we're trying to deploy, and that's really kind of the court of public opinion. Now, those publics might be investor publics, or they might be wider public sphere. But we have to be responsible in the way we interact with the cultures that we meet along the way. As we go out and try and deliver what we're trying to deliver, we need to be sympathetic to their own goals and develop in a way that is works with them rather than against them, if we're going to be deemed a responsible organisation. A little bit more detail on some of those. So with an immature technology, some of you may be familiar with the phrase precautionary principle. Precaution principle applies for some funders. It doesn't apply for other funders. It applies for some constituencies, but not others. So in the EU, precaution principle is extremely strictly adhered to. In the US, it is risk-based analysis rather than rules-based analysis. So there's different ways that we have to address at the development of our technology. We need to be understanding that our deployment model will change. It's a matter of negotiation between policymakers, the communities we work with, the technology, and our own economic imperatives to deliver the impact that we're seeking to deliver. That might not be apparent at the start of the project, on the inception of the company, or the launch of a charity or charitable initiative. But we need to understand that evolution is inherent in the roles and responsibilities that we take on. The types of funding and the funding pools that are available to different projects are different as we grow. So you will not get a pension fund investing in a high-risk startup such as our own, because they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to put their pension fund at risk, or that kind of risk. At the same the other end of the scale, you won't get very, very small amounts of funding with virtually no expectation of return once you get past a certain point in maturity. And to comments earlier in the session on, I believe it was from the representative from Re3D, revenue does change everything for an organisation, and that's true for both profit making and non-profit making. So on the funding mechanisms, different funders have different expectations, and they themselves have different legal constraints on them. So responsibilities there to funders is a many splendid thing. And different funding channels can codify them in different ways. So they can be expressed through tax regimes, through explicit health and safety regulations, through oversight needs, or in terms of things like the terms of loans in contract provisions. So there's lots and lots of different roles and responsibilities there, and they can be expressed in different ways, such as choosing different banking partners that have different investment criteria. So there's for an organisation that's wishing to be responsible, there's lots of texture in there to consider. And further on legal constraints, the different jurisdictions that we operate in. As a UK company, we are subject to UK law, of course, but as we sell our materials around the world, we are subject to legal oversight in terms of product safety, in terms of worker safety, in terms of environmental regulations, and all of these different kinds of legal formats, legal frameworks constrain how we deploy our technology. Some of the times they will ask us to formulate our roles and responsibilities in a way that is not really what we want to do. But in order to gain permission to work in that legal constituency, in that jurisdiction, we might have to do something for them in order for them to open the door to us. So the ideal of a single concept of legal responsibility just doesn't exist, and we shouldn't try and overprint that on other people's legal frameworks. It's really, really tricky to go global, and the scaling problems from single nation operation to transnational operation are extreme, and it's not really accessible for a very small company or charity to do it. It's too much of a logistical and financial challenge. And finally, the Worley one, which is the first public and investor present perception. If we define our envelope of responsibility, that's not necessarily a great thing. So if we put that explicit thing in our mission and make that everything, if we publish all the policies and putting all the documentations as an evolving and growing organisation, sometimes that actually puts up barriers against people. So, for example, our mission is termed solely in terms of CO2 emissions. If you don't believe in global warming, that's an obvious barrier, but in other terms, people's priorities might be different. So fishery filament's priorities is a global challenge. So at a community level, we have community level implementation and deployment, of course, but the priorities for those communities may be different from the organisation that is rolling out the actual specific deployment within them. And we find a lot of interactions where groups of people or organisations feel that they themselves should be our natural friends and should input into our own sphere of responsibility, our envelope of responsibility, but actually their mission, their own organisation or mission is not aligned with our own. Even though we don't disagree with them, we can't go along with what they're doing because it will take us off on a tack that will actually reduce our social responsibility and environmental responsibility too. So, in summary, responsibilities arise, they change. You can be given a responsibility, you can assume them, and they come from all directions. It's not something you get to be exclusive and choose a single thing that you are responsible for. External legal and cultural sources can collide with ethical, scientific and economic sources of responsibility, and there's nothing you can do to change that. You've got to surf the wave of oncoming responsibilities. It really is a challenge. additive manufacturing has potential because of the way that it is a distributed manufacturing medium to actually interact with an awful lot more kinds of responsibilities than conventional manufacturing and centralized recycling. So the choice to engage with 3D printing as a means for impact, as a means to change the world for the positive, brings with it certain challenges that conventional manufacturing does not. And that's not a bad thing. But we have to be really, really clear that sometimes this kind of idea of a single solution for responsibility exists. It really doesn't, and it's an evolving, changing challenge. And what does this mean for Fishy Filaments specifically? Our responsibility is changing. It changes. It's changed significantly from when it brought the project to the world in 2017. It was relatively small scale, and it was aimed at a specific challenge. But actually, the opportunity that has arisen because the solution that I've developed is a solution to a far larger problem, and has potential to be a far larger positive impact. Actually, my responsibility is to bring that technology to a global audience is a driving factor, and it's changed the way that I have to think about the company and how it can develop. And one of those things is our legal responsibility. It has really, really changed a lot. When you're operating at a very small scale, especially in things like recycling, there are minimum thresholds for oversight. So in the UK, you can recycle 2 tons of plastic a year and sell the products from it, and nobody will bat an eyelid from a legal perspective. Once you're over that 2-ton barrier, then you're deemed a commercial entity, and you take on some extra responsibilities. There's another next step is around 300 tons a week, and you take on other responsibilities like the site has to be regulated under environmental legislation and has to be inspected and these kind of things. So as we grow, as the size of our company grows, we will go through different legal thresholds. Sometimes we don't get to choose those thresholds, so certainly we don't get to choose on legal thresholds, but we also sometimes don't get to choose because the world around us changes. And we funded Fishy Filaments before David Attenborough's Blue Planet 2 came out, and the world changed. The public sphere changed its view on marine plastics about 6 months after we funded, and that changed a lot of things for us. And it put a lot of responsibilities on us that we weren't looking for. But at the same time, they're not particularly unwelcome either. There's a lot more visibility than we had back in 2016. And I've kind of taken the stance that whatever happens, be polite, but remember the mission. And just to kind of conclude, I've got two examples of the extremes of scalability that we are right now. So we're currently producing, well, we're not producing, we're supplying material for Philips Lighting, which is a multi-billion-dollar company with 36,000 employees. And you can buy light fittings made of material that we recycle in our plant in Newlyn for nearly €200 a pop. And you can follow the online tool there. At the other end of the scale, you've heard Mike talk about it before. Zoe Sherwood produces extremely high-end jewellery. I believe these are about £400, maybe £300 a pair, sold in Selfridges and other reputable department stores around the world. Both of those clients, both those customers require that the material is safe to use, and they have my guarantee on that, both from a point of view of inventing a recycling process that is extremely efficient, but also we are audited from outside to make sure the material that we send out is safe to use under various different legislative environments. And I know that that's a very, very quick zip through responsibility and the conception of responsibility by a growing SME. but I hope it's maybe put a line in the sand for future discussions. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian, for a really exciting talk there and a keen insight into your activities of the company and some of the pitfalls, I guess, and challenges that you face as well as a SME, which is really great to understand and to appreciate. I open the floor to questions, and it appears we have a couple already in the chat. So the first of these is from Konstantin, which is how much of old fishing nets are recycled into new fishing nets?
None. None.
None. Okay, there's a short, sharp, quick answer for that one. We have another question as well. Is or it could be a comment. Is there really nation scale CO2 reduction potential on the use of 3D printing demand side?
No,
So,
and that's not what I claimed. The recycling of the fishing net and reusing, displacing virgin material across industry using that recycled fishing net is perfectly able to produce 2 million tonnes a year of CO2 emissions impact. If we can get demand from additive manufacturing up to 200,000 tonnes a year for used nylon 6, then additive manufacturing will provide that. But realistically, 200,000 tonnes of used PA6 is challenging in the current environment as a sales target within additive manufacturing. But that's not to say that I'm not working on it.
Excellent, thank you, Ian. And it looks like we've had a follow-up from Konstantin, which is how come waste nets are recycled back into nets? Because
they're too cheap to produce from virgin material. I could take clean, fresh fishing nets from a wholesaler and just chop them up and sell them back into additive manufacturing and make more profit than I'm doing as a recycler. So if you wanted to greenwash the hell out of my business model, you would just become a fishing net wholesaler and skip the fishing sector altogether. That's not what we're about, obviously. But there is a quality drop through environmental exposure, through use. This is post-consumer recycling, it's not post-industrial. And exposure to seawater, UV, and other bits and bobs, fish guts, notably. The quality of the material does drop a little bit. Now, saying that the quality drops a little bit is a woolly thing to say. So it is variable how much the quality is dropping, but it's dropping too far for those original fishing net manufacturers to use used fishing nets as their source material. It's an extremely highly automated production process, and there's only around 10 or 15 companies in the world that have the kit to do it. And a lot of them have very, very close relationships with primary nylon producers, and their wholesale prices beat the hell out of what we can recycle for.
It's a sad state of affairs that money drives it all, I'm afraid, isn't it, in that case? I'll take the liberty of asking one myself, and I guess this is the same one I asked Samantha earlier from Re3D, which is, what advice would you give to somebody, a young upstart, if you will, who's looking to follow in your footsteps and be the next big fishy filament? What advice would you give them, given your practical experience now of operating the SME?
Understand your funding environment, be a confident presenter, and be realistic about the achievable aims within your funding envelope. Don't promise the earth. You can, as a small, as an SME, change the world, and we have. For people who don't know, Fishy Filaments has one full-time employee. He's sitting in front of you. We have spawned a number of copycats in other countries who, since we launched, have tried to replicate what we're doing. And been funded by various governments around the world to do so. We've had no government funding in the UK to do what we're doing, but they have not really taken off because they don't actually have the recycling technology that we've developed here within Fishy Filaments. So they're trying to do what we're doing, but without the quality, and that means they can't demand the kind of prices that we can demand. And it's the as a small company, quality of product is far more important than visibility. People who want what you're offering will find you. We spend no money on marketing, and the fact that I was absolutely amazed last year when we won the 3D Printing News Sustainability Award for additive manufacturing. The only marketing we did, and that is where I asked my 945 shareholders to maybe vote for us, and in a voting pool of over 140,000, we beat companies like Desktop Metal, like Siemens Additive Manufacturing Department, and EOS. They were all in the same shortlist. So one guy working in the corner of Cornwall on a very specific problem, albeit one with a global application, can have a global impact.
That's amazing. No, and congratulations again on your achievement winning that award. It was a definite good benchmark for your company, and I would say really well deserved as well. So, and I'm glad you actually mentioned that as well, because it's that opportunity. I felt perhaps underselling yourself without mentioning some of the accolades that you guys have had. So that's great. Just to draw to your attention as well, my colleague Alan Rennie has put in a comment about funding options that perhaps you might want to have a look at if you're not aware of some of these options here. But in the interest of time, we'll end things there for you. So thank you once again, Ian, for your time and for sharing your experiences with us at this workshop. Thank you.
Thanks, Liza. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.